Hey guys, so today I wanted to spend a little bit of time going through a little bit of the data and research on livestock guardian dogs and what's available and kind of where I feel like the gaps are. This is one of the big reasons I started Guardians of Basileia. I also started researching really heavily when I got my first livestock guardian dog and just started realizing that there were some pretty big gaps in research when it came to how to use livestock guardian dogs on a homestead. There's plenty of research out there that talks about using livestock guardian dogs on large acreages like ranches, but there's really not much research when it comes to homesteaders on anywhere from 1 to 20 acres. So what I thought I would do is today just go through a few of the case studies that I've found. These are all found on Texas A&M's AgriLife Livestock Guardian Dog Program website. I will link all of this in the description information so that you guys can go ahead and look for yourself. And as a disclaimer, I just want to put this out there that Texas A&M's AgriLife program is amazing. They've done some really good research. A lot of it is important and I think applies to even homesteaders, but there are certain aspects of it that I just don't think translate well when we're talking about the difference between dogs that are checked on once or twice a week and dogs that are literally, as you can see, with us 24/7. Anytime I come outside, my livestock guardian dogs are here. They are out in our forest, they're with our goats, they're here with us. They're not ever not around people. And so I think that the way that we kind of apply these dogs to our lives is a lot different, and there's certain aspects of the training and kind of the philosophies that just aren't going to match when we're talking about smaller acreage and homestead. If you're talking about where your home is, where you live, where your children are, where your family, visitors, all of that kind of stuff, some of the ways that larger ranchers are going to be utilizing these dogs is just not the same. One of the biggest reasons I think this matters is because it has to do with the success of these dogs. The likelihood that a dog is going to fail or flunk out or be rehomed because they did something undesirable is much higher if they're raised with the wrong philosophy. I thought that it would be helpful and beneficial to kind of go through some of the case studies that are listed on the Texas A&M website. I'm not going to go through all of them, and if you would like to do that on your own, I highly suggest that you do. I think that they're very informative. Tons of great information on the Texas A&M website, and like I said, I don't have anything against this program. I think they're doing great work, but it's great work for the people that it's for, right? And most of this research is actually for large-scale operations and ranches. So the first one that I wanted to look at with you guys is one of the 2017 case studies that they did at Jernigan Ranch in Pecos County. The interesting thing to note here is that they had two pastures of approximately 2,500 acres each, which is a total of 5,000 acres, guys. That's a ton of space. No, I don't have 5,000 acres. I have 10. Soon to be 60, but still nowhere near 5,000. One of the other interesting things is that a lot of the dogs that they are using in these case studies actually came from one specific place. It's called the 5R Stock Dogs. It's in Billings, Montana. I'm not sure if they kind of had a program with them where they were a producer and they got these dogs from them. They also specifically will speak about AgriLife trained or bonded dogs, which are part of the bonding program that Texas A&M AgriLife runs, and they have their own protocol for how they raise these puppies and you know, kind of how they start them. So keep that in mind. Some of these dogs are raised one way and some are raised another way, so I think that also matters, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the first thing that they usually do is to take these dogs and place them in small pens. By small pens, we're talking about a half acre. Each of these dogs, and I believe that these dogs, if I do understand, they're usually between puppy age and around 1 year. It kind of varies between case studies. So in this particular case study, they took the sheep and the dogs and they placed them in basically like bonding pens. They were half acre pens, and they kept them here for a couple of weeks. Then they transported them to a 100-acre tract with about 400 head of sheep. And then they eventually released the livestock guardian dogs, I believe it was just a few days, into a 2,500 acre pasture. Okay, so something interesting here is that they are only checking on these dogs periodically. It says weekly. So that is the level of human interaction these dogs are getting. This is not, my dogs see me, I couldn't even tell you how many times a day. At least 5, 10, 15, like we're out here constantly. So the sheep and the dogs were only checked on once a week. Due to the size of the pastures and the density of the brush, not all the sheep or the dogs were able to be observed. So they didn't even have human contact necessarily. They might have been seen or observed, but they didn't necessarily even have human contact. The dogs were very active. They were covering the property, but it does say that due to the size of the project, the property in the case study, and due to the terrain, it was impossible to know the rate of predation, meaning how much predator activity was happening. In July, it says that 3 lamb kills were found attributed to coyotes. And it also talks about the problems that this particular case study encountered. And not surprisingly, it says that the livestock guardian dogs were very difficult to catch. 2 of the dogs would be able to be penned with sheep and then caught in working pens. 2 of them would hide and were never able to be caught. They did not adjust to the self-feeders, and they ended up not eating well and losing a lot of weight. And then, unfortunately, one of the livestock guardian dogs went missing completely after they were released into the pasture, and they ended up having to bring in a replacement dog. They don't know where the dog went. And so I find that horribly sad as a breeder of livestock guardian dogs. I don't see my livestock guardian dogs just as tools. I see them as partners, and for me to have just one of my dogs go missing would be devastating. So to me, this is not a success for a ranch. The dogs were not handleable. They had dogs missing. They had predation where they had loss on their property. And I think that they basically, one of the biggest things that they said they would have done differently is basically expose the dogs to people more. It says that the dogs were afraid of people on horseback especially, and that the people were utilizing horseback to traverse such large property, and the dogs weren't accustomed to the horses and they were too scared to be near any people. So that was the first one. The second one that I'd like to look at with you guys is Lewis Ranch. This is in Valverde County. And in this one, the same 4 bonded livestock guardian dogs from Billings, Montana were placed with ewes. 3 of the dogs were released into an approximately 800-acre pasture the next day. Like right after they got them, they released them into a giant pasture. And they stayed there it was during lambing season, and they stayed there until weaning. And so something that, again, I observe is that they say that the sheep and dogs were checked on every couple of days or when possible, okay? It says due to the terrain, it was impossible to view the sheep and dogs like all the time. They couldn't find all of them all the time. It said that 1 dog stayed in the original pasture and was not reported to have left the area. This dog was relatively friendly and easy to catch. However, it was not well bonded with the sheep, so it didn't really succeed in bonding. The second one remained with the original placement. It ended up fleeing from the original pasture and was placed with a group of ewe lambs. So they had some bonding issues and some issues with the dogs kind of staying with the ewes that they were bonded or supposed to be bonded with, and they kind of just bonded with who they wanted to bond with. But the interesting thing in this particular case study was that 2 lambs were killed by the livestock guardian dogs in the water lot, and a couple of newborn lambs were found dead in the pasture, and they had been eaten by the dogs. And so it's not known for sure what was eating the lambs or killing the lambs to begin with, because they did have, it says caracara and coyotes on the ranch, and they were known for that. But here's what my thoughts are. Even for a ranch type operation, livestock guardian dogs killing lambs happens when there is not enough shepherd interaction, when there is not enough shepherding and leadership. You, in my opinion, you never, ever, ever put a livestock guardian dog into its first lambing season without shepherds around. That's just a recipe for disaster. The smell of the lambs, the blood, the bodily fluids, the fact that the lambs are so helpless, or kids, they can't really stand up for themselves. And what ends up happening is those dogs start chewing on afterbirth, on the umbilical cord. They just keep going because the lamb doesn't protest, it can't walk, and they end up eating the lamb. It's very sad, but it is also a very understandable and natural thing to happen. And it requires a shepherd's leadership to say, hey, we don't eat lambs, don't do that. Another thing in this particular study was that this dog was suspected of killing more lambs. They stayed with the sheep most of the day. It says they were turned out into a 1,000-acre pasture, but two of the dogs also, so multiple of dogs in this particular study, you can go ahead and read it, but multiple of the livestock guardian dogs were accused of having killed and eaten lambs. It says that the dogs were very afraid of people. They could not be caught or gathered into a pen. One of the dogs was captured by running it down on horseback and cornering it in thick brush. To me, that is just absolutely no. I understand the reason behind kind of some of the philosophy of wanting hands off and things like that, but if you can't even catch your dog, that level of stress, number one, is so horrible for these dogs. And number two, how do you treat them for any medical issues? How do you train a dog that you can't even handle? To me, it's just like a no-go. It also says that one of the dogs went missing in the late spring and never was found again. Again, totally another missing dog. That's devastating. The dog would not let sheep drink from the water trough because it thought that they were trying to get into the feeding station. So there was some serious resource guarding, which is a problem. There needed to be more shepherd intervention here. They ended up having to move the feeding station away from the water source, which ended up helping this particular problem. I'm gonna go ahead and go back, and then they have probably 5 or 6, probably more than that, 8 studies in 2017. And then there's about 5 studies that were done in 2021. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at a couple from the ones from 2021 and share those ones with you, and then I'll wrap up. So in 2021, there's one called Trans-Pecos Ranch. As is evidenced by the names, these are ranches. These are all very large pieces of property. This one, I actually have some positive things to say, so bear with me. This ranch is approximately 15,000 acres, so keep that in mind. And it has around 2,000 head of sheep. So the plan here was to keep 150 ewe lambs a year, and to add back sheep into areas that were difficult to control predators without livestock guardian dogs. So the ranch received 4 bonded livestock guardian dogs as a part of the NCIC project. They got 3 males and 1 female. And 2 of the dogs were pure Akbash, and then 2 were Akbash, Great Pyrenees, Anatolian Cross. And the interesting thing in this particular program that I would like to point out is that AgriLife contributed some of the dogs, and then some of the other dogs were contributed by other producers, other breeders of livestock guardian dogs. The AgriLife dogs were noted to have been more easily caught in the field than the producer bred dogs, which I completely attribute to AgriLife's bonding program and socialization program, and that's something that I really want to point out here. AgriLife has a bonding and socialization structure with their dogs. They insist that their dogs are handled. Now, this is not to the level of a homesteader by any means. They only get something like 15 minutes or 20 minutes a few times a week. But they leash train, car ride, handle them, basic commands like come. And so those are really important to note that AgriLife is doing some really good stuff here that I would be totally on board with, and I applaud them for that. And so this says that the dogs were observed to trail coyotes out of the pasture. They were found fighting a coyote. So these dogs were doing a great job. The only difference that was different between the producer dog and the AgriLife dog was that the AgriLife dogs seemed to be roaming more into other pastures near the end of the project. So interesting note, I don't know that it's of value. That could just be individual dogs in this particular case study. So the livestock guardian dog protocol, which I kind of touched on for the AgriLife, is a little bit more intensive. The dogs are in a pen bonded with hot wire, and they receive socialization, leash training, tether training, truck rides every week. Livestock are rotated in the pen every 3 weeks, and they're placed with the producer bonded dogs at 10 months, and they were tracked until 18 months. So a lot of this behavior that we're hearing of, you know, roaming, eating lambs, these are puppies, right? So 10 to 18 months, these are pretty young dogs, and they have not had a ton of shepherd interaction. All in all, I think that this particular program or this particular case study is great, as it shows that the dogs that were more bonded and socialized, at least with shepherds, to a reasonable degree, were easier to handle and easier to work with. And then the last study that I want to pull up, Campbell Mare Live Oak Ranch in Edwards County. So in this particular study, the ranch received 4 dogs, 2 females and 2 males. 1 was pure Akbash, 2 were Akbash Great Pyrenees, and the last was Akbash Great Pyrenees Anatolian. 2 were bonded by AgriLife, and 2 were bonded by a different producer. There were no issues with the dogs. It says when the livestock were moved at the initial time that the livestock dogs were exposed to herding dogs. So they actually talked about the fact that these dogs were actually working fine with the herding dogs that were moving the sheep around. Excellent, I love that. The male producer was seen chasing livestock though, and he ended up having to use a yoke and dangle stick to help him to prevent him from participating in these kind of behaviors, which are totally normal for puppies, right? And while a yoke and a dangle stick are great tools, in my opinion, the best tool is a shepherd. No deaths of livestock were seen with any of the dogs in either group, so that's great. I like that the AgriLife program produces dogs that seem to be more well-adjusted, and they are not disappearing never to be seen again, right? That's something that we notice here. And so, Audrey, leave it. Come, Audrey, come. Good girl. She's getting excited about a duck. Come. What I like to point out here is that it seems like, in my opinion, while kind of reviewing all of this information, the less hands-on there are, the more issues the dogs are having. The more hands-on shepherding they have, the less issues they are having. And there seems to be this idea that, and there may be a sweet spot for ranchers, right? Because these dogs are getting seen once, maybe twice a week, if that. Whereas my dogs are getting seen many, many times a day. So there may be a sweet spot for ranchers, but overall, it does seem to be that the more hands-on time these dogs have with a shepherd who is teaching them boundaries and limitations and expectations, the better that they're doing. And then let's look at one more. I think this one actually was from 2017. It's called Zububular Ranch in Valverde County. So this is a ranch in Texas. It was approximately a 2,000 acre pasture again, and it was selected because of predation issues. They had a lot of predation. The fences were not in great condition, and the pasture was not accessible except on foot or horseback. So they used 2 bonded livestock guardian dogs from Billings, Montana. They were placed with 10 lambs, and they were held in a small working pen. It says approximately 3,000 square feet overnight. Then they were released into a 10-acre trap the next morning. They remained there for a day and were released into a next pasture with 300 head of sheep. And then those were across a 2,000 acre pasture. And it says that the terrain made it very difficult to gather the sheep and use and everything together. It said observing them were difficult because there was limited number of roads. The dogs were not overly friendly. They were difficult to catch, and they were wary of people. And then something else to kind of note on this one, it says at the beginning of the project, 2 of the 10 lambs that the dogs were placed with had notable wounds around the throat and head. indicating that predation was a major problem at the beginning of the project. So maybe it was predation, maybe it was puppies. There's kind of not a great way to tell this. The lambs were only a few weeks old, it says, and it's likely that the wounds were from small predators such as foxes or raccoons. Larger predators would likely have not had a problem killing the lambs. So in the beginning, the dogs did not eat well from the self-feeders again. They were reported traveling to neighbors' property, crossing boundaries. They were seen on the highway and in neighboring pastures. And one of the dogs was actually caught in a leg trap in the neighbor's pasture, and then it went missing. Again, another missing dog. The remaining dog was reported to roam less often. Oh, there is a fly. Gross. Okay, sorry about that. So when we're kind of assessing all of this, as a closing, I want to kind of, this is why I am doing what I am doing. I think that there is a lot of work to be done with livestock guardian dogs and our philosophy on how to apply them here in America on a modern homestead. Ranchers are going to have their own philosophy, and they're going to have their own way of doing things, but even looking at these case studies, I don't think we're doing the best yet. I don't think this is successful. I don't consider it successful to have all of these dogs just going missing, to not be handleable, to not be able to be caught for medical treatment. All of that kind of, to me, is note that we have work to do, and especially in the area of homesteaders. So what happens is a lot of people will reference Texas A&M, and for good reason, but it's people who are trying to homestead, people who are on small acreage, who have lots of children, lots of family, lots of friends, small numbers of animals, small acreage, and they're trying to apply the same kind of philosophies that they would here that, to be quite honest, aren't always working. And so what I would like to see happen is for there to be more research done on using livestock guardian dogs in a more traditional way, bonding with the shepherd, and using them as a part of our homestead and farm in a partnership and in a way that is going to make amazing, happy dogs and happy livestock and happy family. And so this is kind of one of the starting points for me. I wanted to share with you guys where all this is coming from. I'm not just making this stuff up. I had the opportunity, and I'm going to put the video clip here at the end of this video, but I had the opportunity to ask a question at one of the Texas A&M workshops that they had. They had an expert from Australia come on. She's amazing, phenomenal, and for what she's doing and where she is located, her work is awesome. But when it came down to it, I had the opportunity to ask a question about how livestock guardian dogs, how much research have been done with using them on homesteads like 1 to 10 acres, 1 to 20 acres. And both of these amazing experts said basically zero, that they were aware of. And so to me, that is just like, it's exciting in the sense that I get to be hopefully kind of like a leader in this. I want to encourage there to be research. I want to encourage people to try different things, that maybe what works for a rancher isn't going to be what's going to work for a homesteader. Maybe the totally, don't play with them too much, don't bring them into your house, don't let them be a part of your family. Maybe that's not necessary, because I'm not worried about my dog, going off, 2,000 acres away. They're here, they're home. And they are doing their job amazingly well. So far, all of our dogs have done very, very well. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of start changing the discussion a little bit, and hopefully kind of lead the way in some more research into this area. So if you guys found this helpful, would you please make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below if you have any questions about any of the things that I've covered. I'm going to do my best to put the links to all of these studies in the comments. And like I said, I just want to close and make sure that I say this again. Texas A&M's program, Bill, and all of the folks there who have put a lot of work and effort into this, they are amazing. But the research that they're doing is not the research that people like me need. Some of it is great, some of it applies to what I'm doing here, but some of it doesn't. And I actually think that taking a one size fits all approach to livestock guardian dogs, taking ranching philosophy and trying to squeeze it into homesteading, is actually contributing to a large number of homesteaders rehoming their dogs, to be quite honest. And if we're honest and looking at some of these studies, there's a large number of these ranchers that aren't actually being successful with their livestock guardian dogs statistically as well. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I just want to commend the program over at Texas A&M for their work, and I hope that I can kind of be in partner with them as I kind of research our side of the woods too. So I hope you guys have a great day, and make sure you leave a comment below if you have any questions.
The next one up is from Heidi Garrett. She wants to know if there's been any research done on the usage of Maremas on smaller property, say something in like 1 to 10 acres.
My research has all been on bigger properties. On the smaller properties, well, you can put a tracking collar on the dog, but you kind of always know where the dog's going to be anyway, provided the fences are adequate. So I
lost my audio.
I don't think there has been a lot of research. There's been a little bit of research from Western Australia on free range chicken farms. That's on a much smaller scale. From memory, that was a couple of hectares. But other than that, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I'm not either. Most of the research, that we do is with large ranches.
Yeah, yeah. I think most of it is.